The 3764 Elvis Presley Boulevard. Hit it, Elvis. You got me. All right, so Gary, welcome to this new feature that we have on Elvis Back on Tour. We really appreciate you doing this with us. As you probably know, what we do is we document the buildings that Elvis performed in during the touring years. So 70 to 77, Elvis played 130 cities, and we've been to just about all of them except for a handful. As we did this, we started thinking that maybe a nice feature to what we do is to start interviewing people like yourself. And so we got a hold of you and did a little research on you and thought this would be a cool guy to interview because you were not only at one show, you were blessed enough to go to two. And I know when we talked in the interview the other night, you had said that you were from Iowa when you were growing up. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was military as a little kid, and then lived in Iowa from the kind of the last part of my childhood until my mid-20s.
Okay. And so your mom and dad Elvis fans, or just your mom, or how did that work in the family?
Well, my mom more so than my dad, for sure. My dad was more of a classical music kind of guy,
Okay.
and a certain amount of old time Grand Ole Opry type stuff.
Right. No, that's all good. That's all good.
Little Jimmy Dickens.
Yeah, right. So I know we had discussed a little bit about you said you were from Chicago, so or now you live in Chicago, I'm sorry. And if you could just tell us kind of like where you're at there. And I did see something in there. A good friend of mine is a Chicago Cubs fan, so I'd be remiss if I didn't let you talk about Chicago Cubs a little bit.
Sure. Well, we live in suburban Chicago now, Arlington Heights. I've been here we've lived in Chicago's area since 1987. I was a high school English teacher for a very long time, from 1980 to 2014. Since then, I now work with student teachers and do professional development stuff and work on writing. And I'm never bored, that's for sure. And I'm very interested in music, and I really miss baseball. The Chicago Cubs are, they're, I don't even know how to say it. They're huge, they're big. And in Chicago, everybody is either a White Sox fan or a Cubs fan. If they say they're fans of both, I don't quite believe them.
I'm a big fan of like Wrigley Field because I'm a historical kind of person. So like when you talk about Fenway and Wrigley and places like that, I really love a place like Wrigley because of the, things like the ivy and on the wall. And I remember years ago, I do remember the voice of Harry Carey. And, like some of the players, I don't know all of them, but I know some of the players like Ryan Sandberg, Mark Grace, and those guys. So, Gary, what we'll do now is we'll get into the heart of the matter here. And I want to discuss with you, and we're just going to let you go, but tell us about, we have it as June 20th of 74, where he was at Veterans Memorial in Des Moines. So
right.
Trying to give us like, even go back as far back, tell the fans, like how you got the tickets and, did you have to go stand in line? Do you remember going with your parents to stand in line, and just kind of lead us up to the excitement of the show?
Sure. Well, from what I understand is that when Veterans Auditorium in Des Moines opened, it was used for basketball and conventions and other things. But the first musical act to ever play there in 1956 was Elvis. And obviously I wasn't there. I wasn't born yet. But when he came back in 1974, that was the first time he had been in Iowa since he had been in the same building 18 years before, from 56 to 74. And so, as far as the lead up, Des Moines is kind of a small market, and so it was very exciting when it was announced that he was going to be there. And I don't actually remember how we got tickets. I think some of it was we did some of it by phone. It was probably by phone if I remember right, but I can't be 100% sure about that. I remember there being a newspaper article that said he was set to perform for about 50 or 55 minutes. And so, it was a pretty big lead up there. My mom went, my aunt went, her sister, my brother, younger brother, and one of my high school friends. And we went down there and we ate at the Hilton restaurant in Des Moines, with the kind of unrealistic thought that Elvis might be there too.
Right.
And then we went over to the concert. And, before the concert starts, there's just this festival atmosphere in there. They were selling, all kinds of souvenirs. This is the souvenir book that I bought that night at Veterans Auditorium. I can flip through it. You can kind of see it's a pretty good size album. And, there's a Las Vegas Hilton ad in the middle of it, of course, and just, nice big pictures of Elvis throughout. They're selling buttons and pennants and posters and I don't know what all. And then, the announcer, Al DeVorn, would come on and say, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Elvis Presley Show." And he would mention all the different acts that were part of the Elvis show. And there were some, I remember the 76 openings a little better than the 74. But when the Elvis part of the show came on, then there was an intermission and they encouraged everybody to go out and get some more souvenirs. And then, the lights went down and the Also Sprach Zarathustra music started playing. And when Elvis stepped out on stage at the end of that, I've never seen anything so exciting on a concert stage before. The place just lit up with white lights, and it wasn't from anything, the spotlights or anything. It was those little cameras with flash cubes that would take 4 shots, click, 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 click. And those things were just just firing like crazy. And it just bathed this entire room in this strobe-like effect. And it was just so exciting. That's kind of how it started.
Let me ask you, Gary, the 2 times that I've spoken with you, every time that you start talking about the beginning of the show, when Elvis comes out, I almost see like your pulse rate go up. And it's been, 50 some years now, right? So, or almost 50 years or whatever. But I just see like the excitement after all these years. It still seems like it's right there. Am I right on that?
Well, yeah, I was 15 years old then. I'm 62 now, and I can picture that perfectly. And there's nothing quite like that. I've seen the Rolling Stones, I've seen Paul McCartney, Bruce Springsteen, I've seen a lot of things, but I've never seen anything like the first 90 seconds when Elvis stepped on stage.
That's awesome because, I was telling Michael a while ago, I said to this day, and I never was blessed enough to see him in concert, but in listening to his recordings, I get so excited when I hear that opening riff, and you just hear the crowd go crazy. I just think as an Elvis fan, it's almost like that excites me more than hearing any of the songs that he would sing because it's that I think it's that burst of electricity, that energy, the energy with that guy was incredible. So and that's coming from somebody that never even saw him in person.
Well, yeah, and they did a really good job just production-wise, the build up, build up, build up, and then explosion, And then he started singing.
Right. So tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about, tell us a little bit. So we're still in 74. So we got a completely different song set than when you saw him in 76. And we'll talk about that later. But tell us a little bit about what you remember about the songs.
Well, the CC Rider was fairly standard at that point. It had been on a live album or 2, if I remember right, and even maybe I Got a Woman, which comes next. But what I had not heard before that night was When I Got a Woman segues into Amen. And of course, gospel was really important to Elvis, and so here's this, there's this big sing along of Amen, and I kind of got to thinking about that. I Got a Woman and Amen in the same medley. I got a woman way across town. She's good to me. That's the sneering, sexy Elvis version. And then suddenly it's Amen, Amen, and then it goes back and it ends with I Got a Woman again. That's like Elvis in a capsule right there. Is the both sides of this guy. He did American Trilogy, and he did Jailhouse Rock, and just that's another thing that's kind of amazing about it is how much territory he covered there. His songs from the 50s, and he would do the Olivia Newton-John songs from the previous year or two,
Right.
just to kind of show where he was at on things. The other kind of amazing lighting effect was toward the end of the show when he would, and he did this in Des Moines. He said, you've all seen me now. Let me turn the lights up and get a look at you. And they brought up the natural lights in the house. And there's Elvis standing there. There's all these people and Elvis standing there, not the focus spotlight with the lights on the stage and everything, but just a guy in the room. And he's saying, my, it's been funny how time slips away.
Right.
Turns out the light, well, hello there. My, it's been a long, long time. And that resonated, I think, particularly well on that night when he hadn't been in that building for 18 years.
Right. Right. I wanted to ask you about his uh, physical appearance and his energy in '74. When you said, what are your thoughts on that?
Off the charts, you know. Um, I've seen somebody describe him as he looked like a god from another planet, and that kind of seemed about what was going on at that time. Absolutely in his prime. He would have been 36 years? No, 34 years old then. I'm not doing math real good right now,
Yeah,
but
I never did. So
it's 39. He'd been 39 years old right then.
right,
He
39.
looked fabulous. He was and moved fine and graceful, and he's just a great, great, great energetic showman, and
And
at his absolute prime.
and so being a big since we do the buildings, I've always been very interested in the security aspect um, of his touring and things like that. And one of our greatest memories that we have is we had the opportunity to meet Dick Grobe, his security chief of security, and we got to sit down with him and his wife, and just tremendous people, very kind people. And because I was interested in security, and he was a security chief, the conversation went on for a long time because he found somebody that wanted to hear, exactly what he did, and that was very exciting. So, what I wanted to ask you about is when it was time for the when the show ended, I spoke with Dick Grobe, and he said, as a rule, 45 seconds from the minute that Elvis made the decision to leave the stage, 45 seconds he was in a car and gone. Your thoughts on that?
Well, that's kind of funny because at that 74 show, my friend and I and my brother had made up our minds ahead of time that it was worth it to us to not see Can't Help Falling in Love, the last song, and to scoot out of that building and get around back and see what we could see as far as an exit. And it was a colossal failure. We made a mistake because we were not getting anywhere close to anything with that. So it was a nice June night, and we took off as soon as, like, okay, this is it. Can't Help Falling in Love. Let's go. And away we went out the building, around the back, and there was nothing to see. I don't know if he hadn't left the building yet. My thought is he probably had. That it was just by the time it took us to get out of the auditorium and around, because the entrance was at the opposite end of where the stage was. By the time we got around there, it was over. So I'd seen your post where that 45-second rule, and that's like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
And it took us more than 40. It took us the length of the song plus 45 seconds, and we didn't see anything.
Yeah, Mr. Grobe had told us that they did security just like they do for the president. They would, they had a forward person that went ahead and checked every entrance, every what door could be locked, what door couldn't be locked, the route to the hospital, the route to the hotel, the route to the airport, alternate routes to all of those places. And for 15 city tour, that's a lot of information.
I have a picture of the building and I want to see if you can recognize anything.
Does that bring back any memories?
Yeah, plaids were big. Yeah, that could easily be it. That's the place. And I was in that building for numerous other concerts too.
Let's fast forward the tape a couple of years to May of '76, and now we're in Ames, Iowa, at Iowa University. Is that right?
Iowa State
Iowa
University.
State. And so we're at the James Hilton Coliseum. Now, Michael and I did tour that one, and we've got pictures of it from the outside and the inside. So share with us your thoughts on that concert.
Okay. The Veterans Auditorium from 1974, that building, my understanding is the building is still there, but no longer used in the same way they built a Wells Fargo arena right next to it. The Hilton Coliseum is still used, and it was fairly new at that time, but that is a very nice facility that is still used for basketball, concerts, lots of things. Very nice building, but it was fairly new at the time. We found out that Elvis was coming back. That was spring of 1976. That was when I was getting ready to graduate from high school. It was within a few days of my high school graduation. And by that time, there had the people who wanted to complain about things would talk about, that Elvis was not quite what he had been before. The same group of people went to the concert in Ames. I think it was my mom and my aunt and my brother and my friends, and we went, and we knew a little bit what to expect with the lighting in the first moment. But again, when Elvis stepped out on stage, he was wearing the prehistoric bird vest with the light blue puffy sleeves. And again, it was just extremely exciting. And he did, the CC Rider, I Got a Woman, Amen. First songs were pretty much the same. That show had the comedian Jackie Kahane come out and did a little bit. That had to be a challenge for him. It was a pretty big arena for a comedian that nobody had come there to see. And then there were the Sweet Inspirations. I think J.D. Sumner and the Stamps did a few songs, and then there was an intermission to sell souvenirs again, and then the Elvis show started. Highlights from the show. Well, he was in a little different place physically, no question about it. He weighed, he was bigger. There's no question about it. But his voice, if anything, his voice was even stronger. I mean, it was just this roar. When he wanted to roar, it was amazing. There was a point in the show where he did Hurt, and of course, Hurt is really vocally demanding with a lot of high notes, and he did it. He absolutely nailed it. And then he said, "You want to hear it again?" And he did it again. Just two incredible performances of Hurt. He also did How Great Thou Art that night, and his live version of that, his 70s live version of How Great Thou Art, is also, really dramatic and demanding. And he did, there's two Olivia Newton-John songs, Let Me Be There and If You Love Me, Let Me Know. And I know he did both of them, and I can't remember exactly which place he did which one. But, those were pop hits of the time. And he did those. I know he also did Little Darling that night. And so just another, fantastic show. We stayed till the end on this one.
So, Gary, I'm interested to ask you, share with the fans your thoughts on the energy level between the two shows. In other words, you had said when he came out in '74, it was just unbelievable. Same thing in '76, or because in Des Moines, I think you had, we looked it up, it was 11,000 there, and in Ames, you had 14,000. So what are your thoughts what do you remember about that?
Well, in both cases, those were full houses for the buildings they were in. 74 show was, I don't know how it could have been any stronger or better, or I wouldn't have changed a thing. Not that I would have changed anything about 76, but it was a little different. It was a little more of a Vegas kind of relaxed kind of show. Like it wasn't quite as slickly produced. There was a point in the show where Elvis and different people on stage threw water at each other. They just kind of did a thing where you drink water and they would throw it in. I don't remember if anybody actually threw water at him or not, but they pretended like, so just some goofing around stuff that probably would not have been a part of the 74 show. I can't really say, but it wasn't in the show I saw. Again, he was in a little different place physically. His voice was still absolutely incredible, and it was Elvis. So it was completely exciting for every moment. He was a extremely dynamic showman who knew how to manage every moment on stage. And at that point, he didn't have anything to prove to anybody.
It's nice that you mentioned that about his voice earlier, because we have always said, and I have always said, um, ever since I've been an Elvis fan, that it's a shame that if you listen to his voice in 1970, it's great. But when you listen to his voice in 1977, it's phenomenal. And it's the reason I say it's a shame is because our people tend to focus so much on the physical attributes at that time. And yeah, he had gained weight, but I mean, who doesn't? As they get older, who doesn't gain weight? And it's just a shame that we wanted him to look like it was 1970 forever, and it wasn't. And it's not for any of us. People change, and that should be okay. But we hold the superstars to a higher level, obviously. But you're right. It is a shame that because we focus so much on the physical attributes that we lost sight of his voice. Because I'm telling you, I've listened to the final show that man gave in 1977 in Indianapolis, and his voice was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I think people want what they see on stage to be the encapsulation of their memories. And at that point, there had been the 1950s Elvis, there had been the Army Elvis, there had been the movies Elvis, there had been the early 70s. And now, as you said, he was maturing, aging.
Right.
And so he was not exactly what people expected, wanted, maybe even needed. And so if they were disappointed, that's kind of more a reflection of them in a lot of ways than it is of him.
Point well taken. I like the way you said that. My favorite story didn't even have to do with anything about seeing him. I loved the story, and please share with the fans your story about 77. What happened there? Take it away.
Oh, yeah, Elvis appeared back at Veterans Auditorium in 1977, sometime in the summer. I can't remember exactly which month it is. And my cousin was getting married that day. I was in the wedding. And so family first, we went to the wedding, no question about it. But as we were driving to the wedding, we saw the Lisa Marie plane flying overhead. And so I didn't go to the concert that night, no regrets, but we saw the plane.
I love airplanes, and I'm gonna tell you, that plane I thought was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, the way he had the colors on it and everything. But um, I just can't imagine how excited you were to see that. I mean, what are the chances of you being on the road at the right time to see that, especially since you saw him twice? So you're a lucky guy.
Well, it's also interesting because we have, like I said, I live in Chicago now, and I never saw Elvis in Chicago. But out here in the suburbs where I live, there's until very recently there was a Hilton, and they've now changed it into apartments, an apartment kind of thing that has retail space in it. But anyway, when they were refurbishing it or rehabbing it or whatever to change it, they said, okay, and we will also be selling the doors from the Elvis suite. And it's like, what? And so apparently in the room that Elvis had booked, and nobody could even confirm that he ever stepped foot in the hotel. They said that these are the doors that were in the room that Elvis had booked for his last Chicago stadium appearance. Now, where we live, and that's I mean, I could walk to this place without too much trouble. And it's not close at all to the Chicago Stadium. And so would Elvis have come all this way out here? We live closer to O'Hare Airport than Chicago Stadium would be. But I've always kind of been curious about that particular aspect too. Why was Elvis out here in Arlington Heights when the concert was in Chicago? So
Well, in our research for the buildings, when we research the buildings, we'll actually go when we're out on tour. Sometimes we go on these tours and we'll do 8 to 10 different cities, and we go to these different places. And when we go, we'll actually go try to locate the hotel that he used, and you would be surprised at how. And Michael's asked me about that, and I said, you have to understand. Now, Chicago's different, obviously, but I said, back then you have to understand there wasn't a hotel on every corner back then. Obviously, there would have been in Chicago, but there are some cities that we go into, Gary, where Elvis traveled a significant uh, ways to get to the Coliseum he was performing at, and it was just because of the availability of whatever hotel that he wanted to or needed to stay at. If it was 20 miles, then they drove 20 miles. Not all
that's about what this is,
yeah, that's I wouldn't have surprised me. It really
with
wouldn't.
O'Hare Airport in between.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Because when we were just in Dallas and we landed at Dallas Fort Worth, and then the hotel where he actually stayed, I think in 75, it was at least 10 miles. And then it was another probably 7 or 8 to the Coliseum that he performed in. So not unusual for the time.
Interesting.
So I had one question. So, you said you've been to a lot of concerts. So for kids like my age and like my generation, how were Elvis's concerts different from concerts today?
Well, I think now for one thing, they were a lot cheaper. Beyond that, though, concerts now there's like the laser light show, and then there's like the big screens on the sides of the show. On the sides of the stage, especially the bigger the building or the stadium or whatever, there are those big screens, so you can see. So they kind of do a television production almost. You can see the concert going on stage, but there's also you're seeing big blowups of things. So there's none of that. You had to be quite a showman then to hold the people's attention when there's no big screens off on the side like that. I think another way the Elvis show was different. It was maybe more like a Wayne Newton or a Frank Sinatra kind of show in some ways, or even a country music package show. That there would be opening acts, and then it just got progressively more. Elvis was also not on stage much more than an hour, or an hour and 20 minutes at the most. And now, there are, Bruce Springsteen does 3.5 hours, or some will do 2 hours. And so it was a little more compact. Um, but I like to think those other guys are just trying to make up for the fact that they're not Elvis. He had charisma, he had the song catalog, he had James Burton on guitar and Ronnie Tutt on drums, and this just amazing music. And so I would think that those are probably the main differences. That it was, his show would be on a fairly small stage, really, in comparison to what the Rolling Stones put out there, or Taylor Swift puts out there, or even Bruce Springsteen puts out there. Those are huge stages.
You may have seen my post that I put up the other day and out of all the posts that we've done, I like that one in particular because the theme of the post that I'm getting ready to tell you about was the fact that when we say superstar, when we talk about Elvis, that's an easy word to attach to him, because I was thinking about it, that he goes into a recording studio, pays a few dollars to do a demo in 1953. 20 years later, he does the Aloha from Hawaii special, steps on stage where it's being beamed to, 120 countries and seen by over 1 billion people. I, I just, that just blows me away to think in 20 years from 1953 to 1973, that that's what that man accomplished. So just unbelievable, and I'm just so glad. It kills me that we didn't get to see him, but I'm so happy for you, and I'm glad that you did, and I love that you shared this with us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, superstar is there are superstars and then there are superstars, but the elite, it drops off pretty quickly after uh, Elvis and the Beatles.
That's right. That's right. Well, Gary, we really appreciate your time, and we thank you for taking time out of your Sunday to talk with us. And it's kind of cool because this is going to be a new feature on our page and on YouTube on our channel. And you were the first one that we did this with, so we were so glad that we got to meet you and got to talk with you, and uh, we just really enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
Well, Jay and Michael, I'm a great admirer of what you're doing. You're doing a service to people. You're making memories come to life through the photo lineups that you do, and the getting people like old geezers like me to talk about things that they experienced when they were teenagers. Um, and so you're doing an amazing service, not only to the fans, but I think also to Elvis's legacy. So thank you very much. And I'm honored to be a part of this. And I'm a big fan of you guys too. I've always look at your stuff and enjoy it and keep coming back to it.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks for keeping it going.
Thank you, Gary. Have a great Sunday.
You too.